Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 3.44. We're back.
I've got a funny voice meme for you. I've been working really
looking
hard
forward
on
to
it. Yeah, are you excited to hear it?
Go on, I've heard it, but go on.
My name's Dragon Hadrian, and I love to piss and shit myself.
Can you please
like
explain what were you going for?
Oh, that's it. That's it.
I understand there was
voice
more
meme.
context to it for the previous one.
There was no context.
Okay. So what happened last time?
I'm working on a funny... yeah, so... you just had to hear that for no reason. So last time, let me think. I'm pretty sure Skipper is still fighting Chael, and Dragon and Musashi just defeated Deer?
Deer, yeah.
Yeah. And it was like proved to Musashi that, alright, Dragon's serious business. He's fighting the fight. And now
Deer
we
fucking
are...
died.
Indeed. Alright. So, we ready to jump in?
You go for it.
Alright. Deer lay there, slumped against the wall, dead. Dragon let out a breath that he'd been holding in for quite a while, letting his arms drop down to his side. For a moment, he watched Deer's body cautiously, just in case this was some kind of fake-out. But when the burly security chief moved no more, he allowed himself to drop down to the ground himself, in a sitting position. Is he Slav squatting?
No.
Oh. Footsteps approached, clicking on the hard floor. That's not like is that like a bad term? That's just like the name for it, right?
Yeah, I mean he's not doing that.
Okay. Musashi walking over. The swordsman looked down at the body as well, just as cautious, before glancing towards Dragon. You first? He said quietly. Dragon nodded mutely. Musashi nodded, eyes closed. Gets easier, he said, before turning and walking back out of sight. To check in, I assume check on Hotel, maybe. Or get back to that search for his sword. Check on his gun, am I right? It gets easier? What a bizarre thing to say. It had been exceedingly easy to kill Deer. The man had left himself wide open when he'd gone to eliminate Musashi. Only an idiot could have missed that shot. How could it have been any easier? Dragon glanced at Deer's still eyes, expecting to see some trace of accusation or fear there, something to force him to look away. There was nothing. The body was just an empty house. It felt nothing. It meant nothing. Wait a minute, but I thought that whole, aversion to taking life was why he saved Ruth. Back in the Musashi days. You know what it is? Dragon's just a simp. That's what it is.
Yeah, but it's like... Well, there were different circumstances.
Yeah, that's true, I guess. Once Dragon had... Well, are they? Because he was the one being kidnapped and victimized, and Musashi was about to kill his villain.
Well,
but then he was like, actually, they're not my
though.
villain. Alright, fair. Once Dragon had seen a documentary on the formation of the Darnell breaches. In the program, there'd been an interview with a retired soldier who'd fought against the initial rebellion on Darnell Darnell 1, that hellscape, alongside the man who'd later been promoted to Ascendant General. That's such a badass title, Ascendant General. The majority of the interview had been about that man, but Dragon remembered something the soldier had said near the end more clearly. When you take a life, he said, they become nothing, and you become less yourself. Like a chunk of you is broken off, like they took part of you with them. You can feel it, this hollow feeling. I can feel it now. Dragon searched for that hollow feeling, and found nothing. He felt absolutely fine. There was regret, of course, regret that things had gone far enough that he'd had no choice but to take Deer out, but guilt? Doubt? None at all. He supposed you couldn't trust everything you saw in the videographs. Or maybe Dragon's just a psycho, or one of those. I don't know which is which. The one where you don't feel anything about the things you do to people. Because has Dragon felt guilty about anything yet?
He did feel bad about framing Ruth for 3 murders right at the start, but briefly he felt
right. Briefly, yeah. He's like, oh, maybe that was messed up. With a grunt, he picked himself up from the floor and turned, just in time to see Musashi returning from the hallway, clutching a sheathed sword in his hands. He held it in both hands, grinning widely. Oh, he got it back! I found it, he said to himself, almost breathless. This is so cute. Dragon raised an eyebrow. That kind of attention to an inanimate object couldn't be healthy. Bitch, you just said you didn't feel anything about murdering someone! What the fuck what do you have to say about health? Yeah, but Dragon's like, I didn't feel anything. He's like, liking a sword? That's not healthy. What fucking Dragon? Zero self-awareness. What zero pussy does to a motherfucker. He wondered what the story was behind that. You satisfied now? He said, voice droll. Can we get out of here, or is there a shield you need to find as well? No. Musashi shook his head seriously. I do not use a shield in combat. You ask if we can go, Hadrian, but where is it you intend to go to? What is your next course of action? Dragon put a hand to his chin. Well, we grab the rest of my crew first, of course. Then we do what we can to stop the kaboom. Musashi's gaze turned harsh. Your crew, he said quietly, as though the very word was a condemnation. You mean Ruth Blaine and her terrorist chums? Make no mistake, Hadrian. You are under my power right now. What reason would I have to take you to backup? With a seemingly carefree shrug, Dragon hopped onto the edge of the desk behind him, using it as a seat. Wait a minute. With Skipper's power level, how were they losing to Musashi in Arc 1? Or was he just, like, not available?
What do you mean? Well, Skipper had missed an arm, had he just been broken out of prison?
I guess, yeah. Because I was going to say, if I was remembering correctly, all of them were fighting Musashi except Dragon, and Musashi was, like, 3v1ing them pretty handily.
It was Ruth and Skipper, so Bruno and Zero weren't there.
Okay, that's right. Musashi's revolt with a seemingly... Wait, did I already read that paragraph with a seemingly carefree shrug?
As a seat is where you left off.
As a... Oh, sorry. Well, he drew the word out. I guess if you want the planet to blow up, we could do things your way. Musashi's resolve didn't break. Not straight away, at least. You're arrogant, Hadrian. You truly believe I wouldn't be able to stop this plot without your assistance? Dragon smiled. This would require his finest bullshit prowess, but he was confident. What? He scoffed. You think you can stop this plan by yourself? I do. Still smiling, Dragon leaned forward. You'll have a hard time doing that without the navigation codes. The Dawn House isn't the kind of ship where you can grab a steering wheel and take it somewhere else, you know? It runs on complex systems. A G93 navigation intelligence that runs based on complex code sequences. The only person here who has those codes is me. There was no such thing as a G93 navigation intelligence, and Dragon was pretty sure navigation codes didn't work like that anyway. Still, so long as he sounded confident enough, there was a good chance he could get Musashi caught up in his pace. Musashi, his hand rested on his sheathed sword. And why would you have those codes? Dragon allowed his smug smile to spread into an even smugger grin, just wide enough to be infuriating. You know me, a toy, he said, acting as if he were trying to suppress a triumphant chuckle. I don't go into a place without a plan to get out of it, whether it's this prison or a planet. Besides, I figured I might need leverage if things turned complicated later. Guess I was right to, yeah? He'd won. He could see it on Musashi's face. I really hope, it would be so cool if Musashi just, like, cut off a finger to be like, your insolence. Enough of it. The rage there was that of one who'd been defeated. He'd played into Musashi's preconceptions of him. While grabbing top-secret navigation codes from the very seat of government was impossible for the real Dragon, the one Musashi had built up on his head, I assume in his head, was capable of anything so long as it was duplicitous. That's such a good word. God, I love you. You're a good writer. He'd probably believe that he shot the citizen if he said he'd done it. Fuck you! I take it back. You're not a good writer. You're a hack. You're a meme hack.
How dare you?
Dragon tilted his head slightly, still smiling. Well, do you still think I'm under your power? Musashi, please cut off a finger. Do something. Give him some damage. Then you can be all like, you don't need 10 fingers to type codes, Dragon. Musashi's face was full of barely constrained fury. His teeth clenched so hard it looked as if they'd shatter. His hand gripping his sheathed... I assume sword?
Yeah.
Sheathed sword? Or just his sheath, maybe. His sheath so hard the knuckles were ghastly white. For a moment, Dragon worried that he'd pushed the swordsman too far. But then he relented, looking away. Devil, he snarled, glaring intently at the wall. You are a demon, Dragon Hadrian. A demon who'd gotten what he wanted. Dragon could live with that. Alright, I'm going to pass it off to you for a second.
Yeah, no worries. This place really was like a maze. Ruth kicked the latest security officer through the set of doors in front of her, then leapt to the side to avoid the torrent of plasma arrows that erupted from the now open doorway. She'd expected another squad to be waiting in ambush for her there, so that was good to have confirmed. She'd put on her full skeletal set, including the mask, so everything she could see was tinged bloody red, and she knew that if she looked in the mirror, she'd see her hair blazing just as crimson. A stealthy escape was therefore impossible, and not her style anyway. Her claws, both the ones on her hands and the ones on her feet, were buried deep in the wall she'd leapt to, keeping her attached there like some kind of insect. Even stuck so tightly to the concrete wall, Ruth knew that she'd be able to tear herself free and leap to another surface the second it became necessary. She could feel the strength she needed inside the armour, like feeling the warmth of a drink just by holding the cup. Absent-mindedly, she pulled one hand for... Oh, you okay?
Yeah, sorry. It was just a family thing. I apologize, sorry.
Absent-mindedly, she pulled one hand free and grabbed a plasma arrow just before it could strike her on the back of the head. She always had to be careful with her skeletal set. Unlike the noblesse set, it gave no protection to the back of her skull apart from her normal Aether.
I actually have a question about her sets, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
The noblesse one's the one that shatters and reflects, right?
It does, yeah.
If it shatters, how does she replace it?
So it's more like... what it's really doing is it is disappearing with the shattering effect and being brought back into the Aether when that happens.
Oh, okay. So she's not like actually breaking it and buying a new one every time.
No.
Making it. She has to go to Walmart like every day.
It's just the aesthetic.
Yeah, that's cool.
She tossed the arrow back without looking and heard the modulated yelp of a security officer, followed by the sizzling of burning plasma. Bullseye, just as she'd expected. This was her element. This. Not moping around a bedroom feeling sorry for herself. Not worrying about the decisions she'd made. Not agonising about the motivations of those around her. This, just her and the fight, was all she needed. Just pumping blood and the wind against her skill and the aching of her muscles. Sometimes she wished the fight could go on forever. She leapt out of the
boxer.
She leapt out the wall, tearing out chunks of concrete in the process, and zoomed through the double doors. The room beyond was some kind of mess hall, and a squad of security officers that had assembled to ambush her shouted out in alarm as she was suddenly among them. How sus. Around 10 enemies. Difficult, but doable. Exciting.
I'm gonna kill you.
She swept the legs of the guard nearest her, and as he fell, she grabbed him by the foot and swung him like a club into the two officers nearest him. She infused his armour with her Aether, creating a red aurora, and was rewarded for investment with her target being sent flying by the increased speed and power of her attack. The rest of the officers were still behind her. She couldn't waste a second or they'd shoot her in the back. Wolf whirled around, cutting off the flow of her Aether to the guard she grabbed his armour as she held him up as a human shield. A dozen plasma arrows shattered as they impacted against his chest, and Ruth caught of a scream with a swift snapping of his neck. These plasma bows were fancy pieces of hardware, but they meant that their users were slower to reload. Ruth leapt into the crowd, claws drawn as they fumbled for their arrows, and did what she did best. She was like a whirlwind of death, the blades of her fingers slicing through armour and flesh as if they were both butter. A slam through the door. Another security officer kicked it in, charging over a heavy plasma cannon. He fired, a stream of plasma shooting towards Ruth like a fire hose. No time to think. Her body knew what to do, she just had to trust it. Trust that her hands knew what to grab, trust that her feet knew where to stand. As the plasma surged towards her...
What they call killing instinct?
As the plasma surged towards her, a hand lashed out and ripped away a helmet from one of the fallen officers. Red Aether crackled around the helmet as she infused it, and then she held it out in front of her, neck hole pointing outwards like some kind of artsy bucket. This plasma slashed into the piece of armour, and she could hear it sizzling inside as smoke poured out the helmet seams, but she trusted her Aether would be enough to let it hold. She was strong after all.
Hold on. Alright, finish reading this next paragraph, because I think I know what's happening, and then I need to make a comment.
Ruth span and, like a gardener watering their crops, splashed the plasma she'd intercepted at the guard who'd fired it. He went down, thrashing as he clawed at his burning armour, and she finally ended the fight with a swift kick to his head.
Did you just have this bitch do a Game & Watch down B?
Pretty much.
Then she spilled it back in it. I fucking saw that happen. What the fuck, Dan?
I didn't realise it was a Game & Watch move until you said that.
That's funny.
She took a breath. She was starting to work up a sweat. Tap, footstep on floor, uncomfortably close. Instantly, Ruth whirled around, thrust her claws forward, and stopped them, barely inches from Bruno's face. "Nice to see you too," he said, voice flat. He was wearing the armour of a security officer with the helmet tucked under his arm. In his other hand, he held up a folded-up plasma bow. Ruth stepped back, stretching as she took the opportunity to catch her breath. "So you've got some goodies?" Bruno looked down at the bow. "Yeah, these things work better folded up as melee weapons, if you ask me. Trying to use them the right way is just a pain in the ass." He nodded at the bodies littering the floor. "So you've been busy." The exhilaration Ruth had felt during combat was already fading away, replaced by that persistent anxiety eating away at her like acid.
No! We were so close, Ruth!
She'd been running around so happily in this pointless fight while he knew what was happening to Dragon and Skipper. Seeing Bruno and Serena...
what's happening to Dragon?
Look at this Musashi stan. Look at him.
Yeah, Musashi fan cam. I want to make one of those when there's enough Musashi art, like one of those shitty YouTube edits of like the spinning images with like flashing lights.
If you want to see the Musashi fan cam, do more fan art.
Boo, woo, woo. And it's like him, and then there's like just one randomly where he's like putting a finger to his mouth seductively, and the rest are just like him fighting. Yeah.
It seemed Bruno and Serena managed to go with even the captors without issue, but that had been no thanks to her as well. They tried to get me in my room, Bruno said, answering the unasked question. I don't know how sending.
Send it.
But I'm not stupid. I know an execution when I see one being set up. Hid in the corner and grabbed the guy when he came in. Bruno's dull expression was replaced by Serena's wide grin. His neck went crack, she said excitedly. It was awful.
You've gotten better at voice acting. I can tell the distinct differences in the voice. I'm being serious. You're getting better.
Right, Ruth said. There wasn't really anything else to say. What about Dragan and Skipper? Do you know where they are? Serena's grin faded. Bruno shook his head. No clue. Once I had this armour, I could sneak around pretty easy, but they weren't in the cells the records said they should be. Those rooms were empty. Ruth's order ran cold for a moment. That couldn't mean... No, Skipper was strong and Dragan was smart. The S4 wouldn't be able to take them out with such a simple trick. We need to find them.
I hope she's like, Skipper's strong, and then it's gonna cut to their fight, and Skipper's like getting the shit beat out of him by Jail. It's like punching his face in.
It's like fucking Armstrong from Metal Gear.
Yeah, just like shoving his face into the concrete. You need to be more like me, Skipper!
Why would you die?
Oh, man.
Blades, son. We need to find them, Ruth said quietly. How? She couldn't sense either approval or disapproval in Bruno's tone. He was completely neutral, a soldier awaiting orders. Ruth took a deep breath. Time to do some thinking. Enough defending. That wasn't Skipper's style.
You want to keep going? I can take back over.
Yeah, sure.
Going. I do not care. You sure?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Enough defending. That wasn't Skipper's style. He charged forward across the function room floor, kicking off the remains of a table as he made a beeline towards Chael. The citizen, standing still, simply stared at his incoming assailant. Made sense. The citizen could fire off as many attacks as he liked without even lifting a finger. There was no need for him to move. But that was what Skipper was counting on. The blades came, firing out from Chael's torso, a dozen spikes, long and thin like needles. Any one of them was sharp enough to pierce Skipper's body, and fast enough to send him flying backwards. But that was only if they hit him. Heartbeat landmine. The pulse of sound that burst out of Skipper's body. He could feel it rumble at his bones, redirected the spikes, sending the majority of them shooting off to the left and right. Only one remained close enough for what Skipper had in mind. Emerald Aether infusing his prosthetic hand, increasing its durability as much as it could be improved. Skipper reached out, I assume, and grabbed the blade out of the air. No time to think. Oh, is he going to spin it back? No time to think about how. Even with the infusion, the blade was steadily slicing through his metal palm. Skipper thought his... Skipper brought his body low to the ground and hurled a spike towards Chael's face like a spear. His target was obvious, the small gap in the helmet through which the citizen's red pinpricks could be seen. Before the blade could reach its mark, new silver shards grew to cover the gap in Chael's armor, his red gaze instantly covered by a sea of interlocking silver spikes. Skipper's projectile shattered against that shield harmlessly, but that was fine. That was ideal, in fact, because now, for just a second, the citizen couldn't see. Skipper glanced upwards. Oh, is he gonna Caesar him? Heartbeat bayonet! The whistle that escaped his lips grew in intensity, the sound waves being infused with his aether and gaining new properties, sharpness, strength, mass! For just a few moments, the audio was given a physical presence in this world. The invisible blade slashed incessantly against the ceiling, the already weakening ceiling, leaving deep gouges in its surface before fading away. A second later, there was a rumble, a resounding crack, and the damaged ceiling burst apart, the roof finally collapsing in on itself, the weight of the ship above falling directly down onto the citizen. That made him move. As the face shield he'd created dissipated into gray aether, he turned his face upwards, and a mass of blades...
Yeah.
Sorry, that just weirded me for a second. Mass of colossal blades, there we go, erupted from his back, dwarfing his own body in size as they held the ceiling up. Skipper rushed forward, blasting heartbeat shotguns behind himself in order to increase speed, and within a second he was right in Chael's face, I assume in. Oh, this is like that moment where it's like, the guy's like looking up, and then he looks back down and it slow-mos, it's like Skipper's face is an inch from his.
It's like, what? When did you get so close?
Heartbeat bayonet. He couldn't exactly tell through the mask, but he swore he saw those red eyes widen, just slightly. Against an enemy like this, it was common sense to keep your distance and engage carefully. Skipper didn't much subscribe to common sense. He reached forward into the mass of blades, grabbing the remains of Chael's tuxedo collar and pulling him close so they were nearly face to face. Oh shit! Skipper's emerald aether crackled as it did its best to prevent the blades pressing against him from piercing his body. What are you? It was natural for Chael to be confused. This was clearly a suicidal move! Even with Chael being preoccupied holding the ceiling up, there was nothing stopping him from annihilating Skipper with the blades covering the rest of his body. The spikes forming his armor lengthened slightly, preparing to fire. Heartbeat landmine. A pulse of sound burst out of Skipper's body, and the spikes directly touching him shattered. For a moment, Chael's surprised face was visible before new spikes grew to cover it. Heartbeat landmine! Heartbeat landmine! Heartbeat landmine! Sound shattered the blades again and again, even as they constantly replenished themselves. The gap between Skipper's attacks was too short for Chael to fire the blades, and if he tried to retreat, he risked bringing the ceiling down upon him. He was always doing a fucking, like, burning lust to death moment. It's like just sheer wear down his endurance. The whole thing came down to endurance. Oh, fucking, it was the next line. Skipper felt dull pain pulsing through his body as the blast of sound reverberated through him. He knew Chael would be suffering too, producing those many blades in so short a time. Who would give first? Heartbeat landmine, new spikes. Heartbeat landmine, new spikes. Heartbeat landmine, new spikes. The carousel of combat went round and round, second after second, resetting itself endlessly. I'd say, grunted Skipper, pushing through the pain, we're at an impasse, yeah? No, snarled Chael. We're at an end. Oh, so he was planning something then. Maybe a blade had landed behind Skipper then, and he was planning to grow new spikes from it to run him through. Now that he listened, he swore he could hear the tinkle of falling metal behind him. That was fine. He thought of that. All that meant was that they'd have to take a trip. Heartbeat shotgun. Blasts of sound erupted from the soles of Skipper's feet, launching the two of them upwards. The blades protruding from Chael's back snapped, and the concrete they had been holding up came crumbling down again. Heartbeat landmine, continuous. A pulse of sound like a bass drop. Boo! Erupted from Skipper's body, and kept erupting, like a continuous field surrounding his body. As their upwards flight reached the ceiling, the sound field blasted through the rubble, and they kept going up to the next floor, a section of hallway that had clearly seen better days. My neck's starting to hurt, and I don't know why. Ow.
It's because you're looking up like a citizen. You were so engrossed.
Oh, why does it hurt so much? Oh my god. Chael's armor was being shred and reproduced so fast, Skipper could barely make out its features, just an indistinct silver mass. Still, it was holding. Well, he wasn't done yet. Skipper continued blasting the shotguns from his feet, and they kept going upwards, through that ceiling as well. The continuous heartbeat landmine tore through it like a drill. Next floor, a section of offices recently abandoned. The desks and computers were smashed to pieces by their very presence, sound waves ripping through the room. Next floor, some kind of sleeping quarters. They smashed through the bed on their way up, and the feathers that had stuffed the pillows billowed around the room like massive specks of dust. Next floor, another hallway. Next floor, a custodian closet. Next floor, a maintenance tunnel. And then they broke out into the night, right on top of the Dawn House's deck. Cold air filled Skipper's lungs as the harsh winds buffeted at both he and Chael. The moon hung high above, clearly visible, like a great eye observing the battle. There was a moment of distraction. Just one. And Chael didn't miss it. Skipper grunted as a blade-formed boot slammed into his stomach, and the force of the blow and the fear of impalement gave him little choice but to release the citizen. They went flying in opposite directions, Skipper rolling into a kneeling position, holding onto a maintenance handle for dear life. This top deck was flat, slick with condensation. Clearly it wasn't meant to have people on it while the Dawn House was in flight, and the wind was doing its best to send them both flying off into the abyss. Chael hadn't gotten out of that attack unscathed by any means. He was clearly exhausted. He could only produce enough blades to cover roughly half his body now, and his face was bright red from exertion. He landed on his stomach, and for a moment it looked as if he'd just go sliding right off the deck. Then he planted twin blades from his wrists deep into the metal below, anchoring himself into place. Skipper grinned, trying to hide his own exhaustion. "You don't die easy, huh?" Chael glared at him through his own visible eye. The other was covered by a hastily assembled mask of blades. "I could say the same," he growled. There was no more need for words after that. Skipper charged forward, and Chael answered him. I have to say, and I'm not, this isn't me saying like you copied, obviously this is just a trope I love. Record of Ragnarok has a similar moment like this in the Zeus and Adam fight, and this is one of my favorite like kind of fights where it's like the two characters are so badass and powerful that it's like a test of endurance, and even then it's just bah, 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 and it's just so furious and ongoing, and then you finally start to see them crack a little bit. I don't know what it is, but there's something so cool about that, like the limits of like really powerful characters in a setting. Oh, I love it so much. That was fun. That was good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Meanwhile, Fifth Dead be like, I still have all my energy. Ha 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 ha. And then they're gonna have to team up against him or some shit. He's like, Heartbeat Hippo. Skipper's counterattack, Heartbeat Hippo.
No, it's not possible. Not the Heartbeat Hippo.
Heartbeat Hippo.
No one's ever been able to summon him.
Like a Yu-Gi-Oh card. What would you do if the Fifth Dead just pulled out Exodia? Oh, man. Because the Fifth Dead can basically play holographic Yu-Gi-Oh with his Aether, which is kind of cool. Alright, well that was a good time. I can't think of a world-building question. I got too engrossed in that. I didn't have anything in my mind during the reading.
Yeah, I can't think of any either. Who do you think will win? That's not really a world-building question. What do you think the state of boxing is in the world of Aetheral space?
What, boxing? Oh yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Do they have some kind of like... I think I've actually asked this before, but like, are there sports where Aether is allowed, or are there like Aether leagues? Could you imagine something like... Yeah. Could you imagine something like Aether MMA? It would be so cool. No one would watch normal MMA in this Supremacy. They'd all watch Aether MMA. Like, the dudes are just kicking and boxing, and then someone's like fucking Diamond Cutter, and just a giant fucking blue sword appears out of nowhere. Oh, that'd be so sick.
Is that your OC with Diamond Cutter?
No, I was just making up a random anime name. Or something like Sludge Dwarf Attack. Is someone's little dwarf guy. Sludge on the field. Slipping the opponent up as it spews its sludge on the field.
Just a little guy.
That's one thing we need to see more of. I'd like to see an environmental Aether user. One that, like, fucks up the terrain to give themselves an advantage. Like, maybe, like, making the floor slippery or, like, sticky and then coating themselves in an Aether ability that makes it easier for them to walk. That'd be really cool. Environmental Aether guy. He's like, the whole world is my technique. And all he does is, like, make a swamp.
All I'll say is stay tuned to Aetheral Space. You might be surprised in 15 arcs' time.
Yeah, when's that? What if Tanhony was like, alright guys, fine, then we're going to do Arc 4. Now, I plan it to be 4 times as long as Arc 3, but don't worry.
Now that we've warmed you up for Arc 4.
Yeah, that was the prequel. Alright, well that was good. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care of yourselves. Stay safe. Stay healthy. Live, laugh, love. Goodbye.
Bye.